Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about writing the equations of linear functions or lines, the ones that we can graph. And there are three equations that you do need to know for this section. That is the slope-intercept form of a line, which is that y equals mx plus b. Remember, m is our slope here, and b is our y-intercept. Okay, so in order to put something in this format, you do need those two things. Point slope form is the second one, y minus y1 equal to m times x minus x1. And in this particular example, the m is still our slope. Okay, but that x1 comma y1 is a point on the given line. Okay, so if you are given any point and any slope, you can plug the value into this and leave this first y and this first x alone and solve, and you can get another, you could actually get the slope-intercept form of the line. Now, standard form is a little bit different from the others. It's ax plus by is equal to c. Basically, the idea here is that a and b have to be integers, okay? Actually, they all have to be integers. A, b, and c have to be integers. Okay, so typically we are able to do this from the slope-intercept form, or we take the standard form and we bring it to another format. The only other formula you do need to know for this section is the slope formula. Okay, remember the slope formula is the change in y over change in x, which is also written as y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, where x1, y1, and x2, y2 are a given set of points. Okay, so now let's see all the different types of questions that we can experience for this section. So the first type of question is write the slope-intercept form of the equation. So here we are given a standard form equation, and we are asked to put it into slope-intercept form. So to do that, what we have to do is we have to isolate our y, because remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where y is isolated. So the first thing we want to do is we want to move the x term over by using the opposite sign. And I always write it so that my x is in front of the constant because it is mx plus b. That is the standard form technically for the line, so we want to put in that order. Next, I'm going to divide out the coefficient of y with the sign. Okay, now when I simplify the side, remember both terms in my numerator get a copy of that -2 denominator. So negative 3x divided by negative 2x, the negatives cancel out and we get a coefficient of 3 over 2x. When I take the negative 16 and divide it by a negative 2, we're lucky that it works out to a nice number. The negatives cancel out to be positive, and we get 8 as the result. So what information can we take from this? Well, in standard form, we don't really have much information, but in slope-intercept form, I'm actually able to identify my slope, which is 3 over 2, and my y-intercept, which is 8. And in theory, I can use this to graph my situation, right? I can plot that y-intercept and count the boxes for this. All right, so knowing them by name is going to be really important because you're going to get a mix of questions, and you want to make sure you put the equation in the form the direction is asking you to. All right. So now we have write the slope-intercept form of the equation through the point -1 comma 2 and slope of 7. So what are we given here? What can we do with this? Well, anytime we are given a point and a slope, which equation do you think we need to use? That's right, point slope. Okay, so we're going to be using y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1 to find this equation. So what do I want to do? I'm going to plug in all the information that I have. So this y stays, and my y that I plug in here is 2. My slope is 7. and this x stays, and I have minus a negative 1, which actually turns to a positive 1. Okay, so this is the equation of the line in point-slope format, but it does ask for slope-intercept form, which means we need to put it into y equals mx plus b. So to do that, we need to distribute this slope right to the parentheses so that I can break it open, and then move my constant next to the y over to the other side. Okay, and we get 7x plus 9. Okay, so it's not that this point slope is not a valid answer. It is a valid equation, but it asks for slope-intercept form, so we want to make sure we put it into slope-intercept form. All right. So now write the equation of the line through the points negative 5, comma 1, negative 1, and 1, comma negative 4. So notice here we only are given 2 points. It doesn't tell us anything about the slope, but anytime we are writing the equation of a line, we must have a slope. Okay, so what do you think we're going to do here? We're going to find the slope of this line first. Okay, so my slope, change in y over change in x. So x1, y1, x2, y2. We have negative 4 minus a negative 1 all over 1 minus a negative 5. Notice when I say minus a negative, I do turn that into positives. So this becomes negative 3 over 6. So we get the slope is negative 1/2 in its most reduced form. So now from here we have a lot of different choices. It just asks us to find the equation of the line. So I'm actually going to show you all the possible answers to this question so that you understand that they are equivalent. So if we're using point slope formula, right, we actually have 2 options here. We have this point and the slope, and we have this point at the slope. So one equation that works would be y minus a negative 4 is equal to my slope of negative 1/2 x minus 1, okay? And that's using this point here and, of course, the slope of the line. Another option I have is y minus a negative 1 is equal to negative 1/2 x minus a negative 5, which is using this point and, of course, the slope of the line. Now, if it had asked for slope-intercept form, we could use either one of these equations to solve for y equals mx plus b. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first one and distribute. So y plus 4 and get negative 1/2 x plus 1/2. Subtract 4 on both sides, and I get y is equal to negative 1/2 x, and that is minus 7 over 2. Okay, so that would be my slope-intercept form. Now, there is a slight chance that they could ask you to find the standard form of the equation. Now, standard form has x and y on the same side, and all of the values in the equation are integers. So how do I find that? Well, to do that, I need to multiply everything by the least common denominator, okay, so that I cancel out all our denominators. And then from there, move the terms accordingly. So I have a denominator of 2 and 2 and 1, so I'm going to multiply everything by 2. So that becomes 2y is equal to negative. Now, for the first one, this 2 and this 2 cancel. So that becomes a minus 1x. And when I distribute to the second one, this 2 and this 2 cancel, and I get minus 7. Sorry. Now, the only thing left for me to do is to move that x over to the other side by adding it. And I get x plus 2y is equal to negative 7, which would be the standard form of this equation. Now, again, any one of these 4 options would work for this question, but you want to pay attention to the directions. If it asks for a specific format, please make sure you put it into a specific format. Now, another thing they can ask you to do, well, they could, of course, ask you to graph it. All right? We could plot our y-intercept and count our boxes. Or they can ask you to work backwards by giving you the line itself and asking you to find the equation. Now, typically, they will ask you to do that in slope-intercept form. Okay, why is that? Well, the easiest things to find on a graph are the y-intercept, which in this case is 1, and our slope, which we can do by counting boxes. Now, notice we have to make sure when we're counting boxes that all the scales are 1. Okay, that was a mistake I saw on the quiz. We didn't all count the scale in which our boxes are. But when we're looking for the slope, we look for 2 perfect points, or 2 points that intersect at a corner of a box, and we count the rise over the run. So this is going down 1, 2, 3, so that's going to have a negative 3, and we're going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you do it in that order, right, up or down, and then move to your right, okay, you get the slope exactly as is. So what is the equation of my line? Y equals negative 3 over 5x plus 1. Now, there are 2 special cases I want you to be aware of, right? Remember, Hoy, Vux, okay? Those are the letters that you need to remember for horizontal and vertical lines, okay? So when we have horizontal lines, something you have to remember is that it will have a 0 slope. So these can pop up in any question, right? They can show up. So let's say you had something where you had to calculate the slope. If at any point I get 0 over any value, that tells me that I have a 0 slope and my line is going to be horizontal. Okay, those horizontal lines are written in the format y equals. So if I was going to write an equation for this line right here, I see that it intersects at negative 4. We see that it's horizontal. So this is going to be the horizontal line, y equals negative 4. Okay, whereas for vertical lines, they have undefined slope, okay? It's a straight line up or down. Now, an undefined slope in the process of solving will have any combination of values in my numerator, but have a 0 in the denominator. Okay, 0 in the denominator is a big no-no. These equations are of the form x equals. So if we take a look at this example, this equation right here would be x equals, and it intersects at 3. Okay, so you need to be aware that this is a possibility if at any point you get a 0 anywhere when you're calculating the slope. Okay. Now, the last type of questions that you could be asked is about parallel and perpendicular lines. Now, what we need to remember about parallel and perpendicular lines are the following, right? Parallel lines have the same slope, whereas perpendicular lines have opposite, meaning opposite sign, reciprocal slopes. Okay? So anytime you see one of these words in a question asking you to write the equation of the line, you have to remember this fact about the slopes. For example, the one below. Write the equation of the line through the point 4, 2 that is parallel to the line below. Y equals negative 3/4 x minus 5. So notice anytime you have an equation, anytime they ask you to write an equation, you do need a slope. They don't give you that here. Instead, they give you parallel. That means that I am able to find the slope from the equation that I have. So we see negative 3/4. Since it's parallel, it has to be exactly the same, meaning same sign and same values. And from here, we can plug in the slope and the point into the point slope formula. So y minus 2 is equal to negative 3/4 x minus 4. Now, I could put this into slope-intercept form if I want to, but since it does not specify, I am just going to leave it like this, okay? Now, what if it asks you to write the equation of the line through the point negative 1, 4, that is perpendicular to the line y equals negative 5x plus 2. Well, remember, perpendicular means opposite sign and reciprocal. Okay, so I have to identify my slope, which is negative 5, and I want the opposite sign, which is positive, and the reciprocal of 5, which is 1 over 5. So the slope that I'm going to use for this question is 1/5. So I'm going to plug that and this point that I'm given into the point slope formula, y minus 4. 1/5 times x minus a -1. Now again, I could put this into slope-intercept form if I want to, but it doesn't specify, so I am just going to leave it in this